Hi there, friends. We're doing a Zoom recording today that will involve being able to look at my screen and follow along with some of our EL um, slides, and also be able to see the book up a little closer that I'm reading today to help you with today's information. And so I'm going to start with, here we go. Hopefully this works. All right, so today is our second lesson of Unit 2 from Water Around the World. And here are our learning targets today. So the first one is I can find the gist of a narrative nonfiction text. So today, let's talk about what those words mean. So narrative is written like a story. In other words, it has characters, a setting, a plot that goes along with it, but it is also nonfiction. So it's informational. So it's about something that is true and not just a made up story. So that's what kind of text we were going to be reading today, a narrative nonfiction text. Our second learning target is I can explain the literal and non-literal meanings of words and phrases in The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. So literal are things that mean exactly what they sound like, and non-literal meanings of words are when we have a phrase that is figurative language and it does not mean exactly what it says. There's some interpretation there. Third learning target is I can compare the author's point of view to my own point of view. And so we talked about point of view a lot during Peter Pan. We discussed what Peter Pan's view of things was, what Tinkerbell's view of things were, and how Tinkerbell definitely had, sorry there folks, how Tinkerbell had a view of what things were from her point. You know, she thought she was losing Peter Pan, and that's why she was being mean to Wendy, not just because she was a mean fairy. So today we're going to talk about how our point of view differs from, say, the person in the character in a book. So those are our three things for today. So one of the things that you're going to want to know about is that our story that we're going to be reading, The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind, takes place in Malawi, and that is a little country in the southeastern part of Africa. And if you compare where we are, where the arrow is, we're in Conifer, and down where that country is, it's a bit far away. Things are very different there. Obviously, when I'm recording this, there's snow outside. They would not be having snow up there where they are. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and flip over here to our book, and let's read The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. And it's by two authors, William Kamkwamba and Brian Meiler. And you'll notice that one of the authors is actually the character in the book. So here we go. In a small village in Malawi, where people had no money for lights, nightfall came quickly and hurried poor farmers to bed. But for William, the darkness was best for dreaming. He dreamed of building things and taking them apart, like the trucks with bottle cap wheels parked under his bed, and pieces of radios that he'd cracked open and wonder, if I can hear the music, then where is the band? His grandpa's tales of magic also whispered in the pitch black of his room. Witch planes passed through the windows while ghost dancers twirled around the room as if 100 men were inside their bodies. Interesting description of his dreams. So literal, non-literal. They're not literally dancing around his room, are they? Here he is working. See him in his flip-flops. We talked about flip-flops in Africa. At dawn in the fields, William scanned the maze rows for magical beings, then wondered as a truck rumbled past, how does its engine make it go? Pay attention to where you throw that hoe, his father shouted. You'll cut off your foot. So scanned. Scan means to look around. Maze rows. Maze is, we've talked a little bit about that when we talked about the first Americans. Maize is another word for corn. And then you'll say that his attention where you throw that hoe. So he's obviously working with that hoe. He's not actually throwing it, but he's pushing it down pretty hard, it'll cut off your foot. Well, that might be literal. For all of its power over dancers and flying things, magic could not bring the rain. Without water, the sun rose angry each morning and scorched the fields, turning the maize into dust. Without food, Malawai began to starve. There's the other page of the sun. So let's look at some of those words there. So it said, the magic cannot bring the sun. Without water, the sun rose angry each morning. So is the sun is having a little bit of personification there, to rise angry. Well, the sun isn't angry, but it sure can beat down hot and very unrelentlessly, definitely coming at you. Scorch the fields. Scorch is another word for to burn. So the hotness of the sun and the angry makes those poor plants have not any water, very dry and turned to dust. Soon William's father gathered the children and said, "From now on, we eat only one meal per day. Make it last." In the evenings, they sat around the lantern and ate their handful, watching hungry people pass like spirits along the road. Okay, so those hungry people are going by, but they're so thin and hungry that they seem as if they might just be ghosts. Money also disappeared with the rain. "Papani," his father said, "I am sorry. You will have to drop out of school." Now William stood on the road and watched the lucky students pass, alone with the monster in his belly and the lump in his throat. For weeks he sulked under the mango tree until he remembered the library down the road, a gift from the Americans. And we talked when we were talking about when we had some experiences with some of our guest speakers, that sometimes in Africa, the students who are going to school have to pay to go to school. And we started to raise money to help feed those students. And so let's think about what it says. The lucky students pass with a monster in his belly. Monster being the growling monster. So when your stomach growls when it's hungry, there's not actually a monster in his belly. So that's figurative language. And a lump in his throat. So lump, sometimes you get a lump in your throat when you feel badly about something. And so he doesn't actually have a lump, again, figurative language. For weeks he sulked under the mango tree until he remembered the library down the road, a gift from the Americans. He found science books filled with brilliant pictures. With his English dictionary close by, William put together how engines moved those big trucks and how radios pulled their music from the sky. But the greatest picture of all was a machine taller than the tallest tree, with blades like a fan. A giant pinwheel, something to catch magic. Slowly, he built the sentence, "Windmills can produce electricity and pump water." So he's doing his research. He closed his eyes and saw a windmill outside his home, pulling electricity from the breeze and bringing light to the dark valley. So he closed his eyes and now he's imagining it. So far, if we are thinking about the gist of the story so far, we know that there's a boy named William whose family lives in Africa and is very poor, and they live in a part of Africa where water is not very easily accessed. And he is thinking about a way to solve his problem. He saw the machine drawing cool water from the ground, sending it gushing through the thirsty fields, turning the maize tall and green, even when farmers' prayers for rain went unanswered. This windmill was more than a machine. It was a weapon to fight hunger. "Majesty, Monfo," he whispered, "I will build electric wind." So he's thinking about, if he builds this windmill, what will happen? That it will draw the cool water from the ground, sending it gushing through the field so that the plants can grow. And the windmill was more than a machine. It's a weapon to fight hunger. Is it actually a weapon? Is it a literal meaning or a non-literal meaning? It's non-literal. It means it will help grow the food that people can eat, not that it's actually a weapon. In the junkyard, pieces appeared like rusted treasures in the tall grass, a tractor fan, some pipe, and bearings and bolts that require every muscle to remove. Tonga, he'd shout to the birds and spiders, holding up his prize. But as William dragged his medals home, people called out, "This boy is Masala. Only crazy people play with trash." Here he is with his treasures. So again, when we're talking about words being literal and non-literal, rusted treasures in the tall grass. We know those treasures are treasures because they are something that he found that means something to him and that he can use to make other things, not that they are actual pieces of gold or gems. And he's shouting to the birds, and so he's excited about what he found. So now that he's gotten his idea, now he's putting it into motion. After many weeks, William arranged his pieces in the dirt, a broken bicycle, rusted bottle caps, and plastic pipe, even a small generator that powered a headlight on a bike. So we've got all his belongings here that he's found. For 3 days, he bolted, banged, and tinkered, while chickens squawked and dogs barked and neighbors shook their heads saying, "What's Masala doing now?" Remember, Masala was a crazy boy. So here's all his belongings, all right? And they shook their heads, because they don't know what he's doing. And now he continues to work. His cousin Jeffrey and best friend Gilbert soon appeared. "Mulwa Bwanji," they greeted. "Can we help with electric wind?" "Grab your pangas and follow me," he said, and took them into the forest. Together they swung their sharp blades into the trunks of blue gum trees, then hammered them together to make the tower, the big tree. Standing atop, William shouted, "Bring it up," while the boys tugged and heaved. A crowd gathered below and gazed at this strange machine that now leaned and wobbled like a clumsy giraffe. Some giggled, others teased, but William waited for the wind. So here we have some more figurative language. It wobbled like a clumsy giraffe. So now that gives us the idea that we can see that in our head, that it's wobbling, it's unstable, but very tall. So now the gist is now he's getting all of his materials together. He's made this amazing object. So here's the whole picture. I wanted you to see the picture before I read. It says, "Like always it came, first a breeze, then a gusting gale. The tower swayed and the blades spun round. The wind came." With sore hands, once slowed by hunger and darkness, William connected wires to a small bulb, which flickered at first, then surged as bright as the sun. "Tonga," he shouted, "I have made electric wind." So now he's proved that by the electricity generated by the windmill can operate something electric. So at the moment, it's not going to produce water, but it did produce some electricity with the light. So here he is. Here's William. "Wachatawabuino," the man yelled. "Well done." As the doubters clapped and cheered, William knew he had just begun. Light could not fill empty bellies, but another windmill could soak the dry ground, creating food where once there was none. "Magetsi Amempho, electric wind, can feed my country," William thought. So he's got his windmill. And here we go. And that was the strongest magic of all. So now they have built all of those windmills to produce to make the water. So here we're going to read this last part here. William Kamwamba was born in 1987 and grew up near the village of Wimbe, located in the central Malawi. Like many people in Malawi and the rest of sub-Saharan Africa, William's father, Trywell, was a farmer. The Makwambas grew a kind of white sweet corn called maize, which they ate for every meal in the form of porridge called sima, so that to make extra money for clothes, medicine, and other essentials. They also raised tobacco to sell to the capital city, Lilongwe. Because their only food came from the ground, any problems with the weather or changes in the price of seeds or fertilizer could cause serious problems. That's exactly what happened in 2001 and 2002. A severe drought killed most of the maize fields in Malawi, including those of William's father. Within several months, the entire country had run out of food and began to starve, a terrible event known as a famine. Eating only one meal per day, William, his parents, and 6 sisters began losing weight. At one point, his father even went temporarily blind from hunger. The famine killed over 10,000 people in Malawi, including many in Wimbai. With no money to pay for school fees, high school in Malawi is not free like in America. William had to drop out, but instead of sulking around, he began visiting a library that was started by the American government. There he found books on science, which he loved. William didn't speak good English, so he used dictionaries to learn the words describing the pictures that so intrigued him. One of the pictures was a windmill. The words said that windmills could produce electricity and pump water. Like most people in Malawi, William's parents had no electricity, and the water could be used to feed his father's fields. Never again would they have to depend on the rain. I will build a windmill, William thought. The pieces William used to build his windmill were a tractor fin, shock absorbers, and the frame of a broken bicycle missing a wheel. For blades, he melted plastic pipe over a fire and flattened them, then carved their shape with a saw. For a generator, he used a dynamo, which is a tiny bottle-shaped device that produces electricity by turning magnets inside of a coil wire, something called electromagnetism. When the wind blew, the blades acted like pedals and spun the tire, which turned the coils inside the dynamo and produced a current. A wire from the dynamo reached down to William's room and powered a small light bulb. He was 14 years old. Eventually, William used his windmill to charge a car battery, allowing him to power 4 light bulbs in his parents' house. But his dream of pumping water wasn't achieved until several years later when he built his green machine, which pulled water from a small well near his home and fed his mother's garden, allowing her to grow vegetables year-round. In 2007, William was discovered by some journalists and invited to speak at the TED conference in Tanzania. He'd never been in an airplane or even seen the internet. Many people were moved by his story and donated money to send him back to his school and eventually install a solar-powered water pump that irrigated his father's fields, forever protecting them from hunger. William is now a student at Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire. He's studying to be an engineer and plans to return to Malawi to work on renewable energy for electricity and pumping water for villages. So, wow, that is quite the meaningful story. I really like every time I read this, it's a powerful thing. I want you to think about point of view. So each section of those stories had a gist about what was going on in the story. And one of the important things that we're going to talk about, there's lots of good vocabulary as well, but one of the things we want to really focus on is point of view. So if you think about a point, so sometimes an author's point of view is different from the reader's, usually because the author's experience with the topic is different than the reader's experience. So we here in Conifer have a very different experience than William and Malawi. And so I'm going to ask you some questions and I really want you to think about them. So what is his experience with accessing water? And what in the text makes you think so? What did you hear that makes you think that his experience is different than ours? And what is our experience with accessing water? I'm going to ask you both of those questions in the Google form. And then I want you to also think about this. In this text, the author's point of view about accessing water is that everyone should have access to water and that the problem of accessing water can be solved with hard work and perseverance. So think about what is your point of view of how accessing water can be solved. What do you think about in your world here and how you think that it might be able to be solved? So is it the same or different from the author's point of view? All right, so I'm going to ask you to go ahead and you can watch the video again if you need, but I want you to think about how your experience with water and William's experience with water is different and how you think maybe we could solve some of these problems that the world is having with accessing water. And fill out the Google form. All right, friends, we'll see you next time.